today we are here to talk about impact of learning in the workplace, which is a topic that I feel is absolutely essential when you are in training these days. Traditionally, the quality of a training is evaluated with the learner survey, but just a learner survey tells us how happy and how enjoyable the training was. It doesn't tell us what they're going to do to change, how they're going to transform their work, how they're going to change, what they are going to do differently. So, so the aim today is to empower all of you in the training world to have conversations with your internal or external clients about measuring impact. It is particularly difficult when you are external to an organization because your clients, especially if you haven't worked with them, are not always comfortable with sharing data. And sometimes they actually can't collect data, or they don't know which data to share with you. So it makes it slightly challenging to demonstrate impact. And very often we fade away from the conversations. It is something we try to shy away and not tackle. Unfortunately, in the current economic climate, we can't, because return on investment is going to be a key element on budget decisions. As a judge at CIPD Learning Awards, the measuring impact is a key element that decide if a solution is going to get shortlisted and win, and if it doesn't. So looking at which data do we need to measure the gap, the issue, the problem we're trying to solve, and evaluating progressions is an absolutely key to excellence, recognitions, and also to, and obviously to impact. So this series that is starting today with Melissa Sabella is the first one on a series of tools, which I think are interesting for us in the training world to explore and see if they fit in with a solution. Now, full disclosure here, I don't think there is one fit all solutions. Okay. There are some very, very exciting things going around, and this is an opportunity to think about what we can do differently, but always think about the goal your client is going to try to achieve, the context of the organization, the context of the learners, and based on those contexts, we can definitely work on a digital solution. I have conversations about impact. I have conversations about measuring impact. And keeping this in mind, I'm very happy today to introduce Melissa, who is starting this series and who is going to share with us a wonderful platform, the Honeycomb Works. But I've known Melissa for many years, and before it was an app, it was based on microbehaviour. It was neuroscience, and I think that what makes these solutions particularly interesting because it is mostly based on research and evolved into an app. So a very warm welcome to you, Melissa. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Gail. I'm doing well. As you said, the weather's beautiful here in the UK, so I'm looking forward to enjoying that this weekend. But it's really nice to be here and to see everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
So today, Melissa is going to tell us about microbehaviour and changing the helping the learners to evolve. What I'm really interested in, and Melissa knows about it because we talked about it before, it's about what a learning journey looks like. So there is quite a lot of our talk is going to be, conversations is going to be about learning journey. We are focusing on the virtual classroom, but Melissa will tell you that it is absolutely, it works as well in hybrid, blended, face-to-face. All solutions are transferable most of the time. We are going to talk about design and what has to be done differently. And ultimately, what is key is understanding and sharing the data and discussing those data with the organizations, with the learners, and how to move things forward. Now, about your questions, this is an interactive conversation. It is all about you. All of you are in learning. Many of you are in design, and we want to make sure we capture everything. So, in doubt, just post your question in the chat. And if we feel that it will be addressed later on, we may not answer it straight away, but we want to make sure you've got an opportunity to have your questions answered, because questions seems to disappear from our heads very quickly. So just make sure you post them in the chat, and we'll pick it up. So that's it for me. I think, Melissa, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Gail. So thanks for that great introduction. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of background how I came to this, which is before launching the Honeycomb Works, I started at an organization called Read Learning, and before that, though, I was in higher education. So some of you might have heard of Read Learning. It's a training organization in the UK, part of the Read group. And because I was new to workforce education and to training, what I wanted to do was really understand, first of all, why do we do training? What is the point of it? Why do organizations put it into practice? And the thing that I came up with after spending a lot of time talking to managing directors, L&D professionals, HR folks, participants, employees, team leaders, fundamentally, it usually came down to a change. We need something to be different. Our sales team isn't closing the number of deals they need to close. Our managers aren't developing people really well, so they're not ready for the next role. There's usually some sort of challenge or issue that needs to be addressed. And even in those circumstances where it might be a talent program, so it's a benefit to people that they feel like they want to develop, and maybe there wasn't a specific challenge for the individuals on that program, they have something they want to address. They want to be better. They want to improve. So really, it comes down to change. And so how do things change? They change when we shift our behaviors, when we form new habits. Now, as I mentioned before, Read Learning, I was in higher education, not in academia, but in at Pearson, a large multinational organization, and my role there was in transformation and innovation projects. And what I learned in trying to drive that change internally was that we could have the most brilliant strategy in the world, know exactly where we wanted to get to, but if we didn't support people to make the individual changes on a day-to-day basis that were going to get us there, we'd look back in a year or years later and find ourselves in exactly the same position. So if we want that training to be impactful, if we want it to make a difference, we really have to focus on this sustainable, embedded behavioral shift. If all we've done is help people to acquire knowledge, but they never apply it, nobody will see any benefit. And if learning transfer happens, but it's only applied once or a couple of times, then you won't see that sustainable shift over time. And that's really what we're bringing to organizations. And it's why they come back to us too. So if you have great feedback on a program, but it doesn't have the impact, then they might not come back to you for the next program and the next program. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't think that's too controversial, but if it isn't, then why don't we just do it? Why don't we do it all the time? And that's because changing behavior is hard. It's difficult. And if you've ever tried to make a change yourself, you might know why. Quit smoking, start exercising. I'm trying to get into the habit of exercising. It has good days and it has bad days. But even if you feel really motivated, it's really difficult to shift something that you're used to doing, a way that you're used to being, and do something completely different. So that's why we turn to science. And as Gail said, when I went through this process of sort of looking at how should we evolve and how should we change what we're doing, I dug into behavioral science, organizational psychology, neuroscience, cognitive psychology. A lot of research actually comes from public health and how we get people to make better health decisions. There's a big wealth of knowledge there, and we took all that and we baked it into the Honeycomb platform, and into trying to evolve what we were trying to deliver. So it's really important to understand why it's hard to create new habits, and to really simplify all of those big areas of scientific research into four key components. The first one is we make it too big. And I'm sure you've all had this experience where you go into a client and you say, okay, what is it that we need to cover? And there's a laundry list. There's a massive list of every single thing that we want people to change and do better, and every perceived challenge from every stakeholder in the organization. And that's always a complicated discussion, because if you try to do all of that, you'll end up achieving nothing, because people won't be able to retain it and they won't be able to make a shift. And again, if you've done this in your personal life, you'll know that if you say, I'm going to be more healthy, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to do all these things at once, you end up not changing anything because it's too overwhelming. And the other side of this is also cognitive load. Our brains simply cannot process a lot of information. We need things in digestible chunks. We might understand it in the moment, but we won't retain it. So this is a really key component in breaking things down into components that are not overwhelming and that I can then achieve. The second piece is self-awareness. And this is really critical when we're talking about things like soft skills, or as I like to call them, really, really hard skills. I'm not the only one that calls them that. It's not original, but these are the things that we do that our memories are faulty. Our perceptions of our actions are not the same perceptions that other people have of our actions. Again, I'm sure you've been in misunderstandings or been misinterpreted. And again, when we're at work, we're consumed by our own behavior and our own feelings, and it's hard to understand how our behaviors impact other people. So we don't really quite know what to work on or what to change. We know the results, but we don't know what we're doing that might be leading to those results. And the next piece is autonomy, some level of control. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I was put on a training course at one point, and I had no idea whether I was put on the training course because I was talent and it was a reward, or if I was doing something wrong and I had to be fixed. So I sort of sat through that whole course that people told me I needed to do, not really knowing why, not choosing it, and not really sure what I was doing there. So some element of choice is really important. But go back to the first one, there is also the risk of overwhelming people with too much choice. So there's a balance that needs to be struck there in terms of giving people advice and guidance, while also ensuring that they have some level of decision so they can feel connected to what they do and what they develop. And the final bit is we can't see any progress. And quite frankly, this is why I always start my exercise regime, because I don't see immediate results and it's really frustrating. So I don't want to keep doing it. And this is really critical when it comes to people who are asking to shift things that they might have been doing for their entire career, that they might have been rewarded for in their entire career. We're asking them to make changes, and if they're not seeing the benefit, the progress, they will give up. And this is also important on the impact measurement side. If we're not demonstrating that progress to organizations, they will also stop investing in the training and in the development and move on to something else. So again, a bit simplified in those four areas, but those are the core components. And I'm going to take you through what we did with the honeycomb. Obviously, I hope you'll like it, but also I think taking you through our thought process of how we built it and why we built it might also help you to think about how you're structuring your training so that you can weave in some of these concepts, scientific concepts, as well to what you're doing. And the core of the honeycomb when we built it was to measure impact. So the first question that we had was, how do we know if we've actually had any impact on this training? And the answer was we don't. And we looked around and we tried to find something that would help us understand what people were doing differently, but we didn't find anything that was specific enough. So the honeycomb was built first to say we need to measure whether or not people have changed their behavior. And then as we were doing that, we realized we actually really don't think they are. So we need to build in some ways for them to shift their behavior so that we can then measure that result. So the honeycomb evolved into both a habit formation platform as well as a behavior change measurement, impact measurement platform. So I am just going to share my screen now, but I think I need Gail, you to stop sharing your screen.
Yes, it's coming in.
Great. So and as I'm doing that, if anybody has any questions, either if they want to come off mic to ask, or post in the chat. I'm curious what people think about that, whether they agree or anything that is challenging.
Well, while you're setting up for the demo, if anybody wants to share how they measure impact already, that would be interesting in the chat. Feel free to do that if you want to.
Can everybody see this honeycomb screen?
I believe so.
If you could see it, Gail,
it's a good sign. If I say it should be a good sign.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, so this is. I'll introduce you to Connie. She is a learner on a program, and if she logged into her honeycomb first, this is what she would see. And the idea of this honeycomb is that it is broken down into digestible, understandable pieces. So each of these hexagons, which we call cells, have no more than 4 behaviors linked to them. And so that makes it manageable for folks. And the reason it's shaped as a honeycomb is because we wanted to show the relationships between the different concepts, but not force a linear progression, because depending on where people are in their careers, they could be really far in their career, but really have some basic sort of foundational skills that they haven't yet developed, or be really early in their career, but actually be really strong in some of these areas. So we wanted to show a way for people to progress, but also for them not to be forced into a specific linear progression. So I'm going to pop into one of the cells so I can talk to you a little bit about the behaviors. And I'm choosing collaborative challenge because it's one of my favorite ones. But every behavior is written based on it being specific and observable, and they go through a review process so that these are valid survey questions, scientifically valid survey questions, but also so that they are something that people can do after. So one of the things that was really important to us was to try to strip out as much bias into this feedback system as possible, because the only way we can really measure behavior is from observation, from what other people can see you doing. So we built these behaviors so that they are things that you can observe. We never ask anything about whether or not somebody values an opinion, or whether somebody is ambitious, or anything like that, because you don't really know what's going on inside someone's head. And the important thing is what you can see they are doing. And what we ask is, how often do you observe this person performing this behavior? And that really actually forces you as a reviewer to think, and to challenge yourself to be more accurate, and to share more specific feedback. And in my own example at the Honeycomb Works, we went through a period where we weren't having the sort of really open conversations that I was used to. We weren't sharing ideas as frequently. So I asked for feedback on collaborative challenge, and what came back was I scored lowest on this, asking open and exploratory questions to understand other people's perspectives. And what I found out was I was assuming I understood what people were telling me, and then I was just jumping off and moving on. And what that was telling them was that I didn't really care about what they were saying. I just had my own agenda, and I wasn't really listening. Now, if somebody had said to me, I don't really think you care about my opinion and you're not really listening to me, I would have no idea what to do differently, because I did care. I did genuinely care. And I was genuinely asking because I wanted the answer. But what I realized was I wasn't actually taking the time to stop and make sure I understood. So that's why when I got this feedback, this was something very specific that I could go and change. What we found with a lot of the other things that were available is it might be you're not listening effectively. And if I get that feedback, I don't know what to do with it. And we also don't know that it's really accurate. So this both speaks to a way to help people develop those behaviors and habits by giving them something specific they can do differently, improving the feedback they get, while also being a more precise measurement tool. And when I talk about the data that we gather, we'll talk a little bit more about how that helps with impact measurement. So so that's part of the process. Now, you might have seen there on that I can ask for feedback, and this comes into the autonomy piece. But when we work with training providers and there are programs that are run, we typically start with what we call a directed survey, where you pick the core things that are being covered in the program, and that gets sent out to folks. So the first thing they'll see is an email saying it's time for your feedback survey. They'll log in, they'll do their results, but then after they get their results, they have access to the Honeycomb for a year, so they can ask for follow-up feedback. They can maybe ask for a different topic if they want to work on something else. So we're balancing that choice, not overwhelming people with choice, while also giving them some direction and linking them directly to the program and giving you a baseline understanding of data. So once I have received my feedback, what I get then is a completed Honeycomb, which has timed out, but anyway, that's fine. So I have my map colored in with strengths and gaps, and this is a tool that I as an individual get from me, so I can see at a glance what I need to, my top area of improvement, what I need to work on, and what my strengths are. What the facilitator would get is the same map, but for the entire team. And so they can see as a group, where do we really need to spend maybe a little bit more time? What are their collective strengths, so that we can maybe build on? And then what are the areas that we need to improve? So the organization can also get a report on that as well. And then over time, as you go through the program, at the end, we do a final Honeycomb, and hopefully you color in your cells and you have a set of strengths. And the Honeycomb is designed to grow with the individual, with the organization, and with you as you are delivering your offer to organizations. So you can continue to add cells to the Honeycomb. And what people tell us when they're using the platform is it feels a little bit like a game board. So like, how do I get to a level 10 me? They see the empty hexagons, they want to fill them in with new topics, they want to color in the board blue. So it really helps them visualize that progress and try to move forward. So in addition to this, people get a detailed feedback report. And as I said, we'll talk through the data in a bit, but that's the sort of the platform as an overview. And I see there are a number of chats have come through. I don't see the chat in my view right now, so I just wanted to check with Gail. Were there any questions that we should cover now, or do you think they're gonna?
No, Melissa, just a few comments and nothing to some enthusiasm, but no specific question.
Good. Fantastic. Well, that's great. I'm gonna stop sharing now. As I said, I wanted to give just a sort of a quick overview of the platform and get to going through some of the more detailed questions and also a little bit more on what that journey looks like. So yeah, I think over to you, Gail. I think you have a question.
Yes, well, it's I really love the fact that it is so learner centric. So you get absolutely to work with what you have. And actually, while we're at it, and we're going to talk about design in a second. No, I'll save my question. So I think I think we need to understand, based on that tools, it's, we see the value of it. How do we design like a virtual classroom, a blended experience, a face-to-face program, and leverage this tool for to really optimize the value for the learners and the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done a little bit of a map of how it typically works with when we work with training providers, and often we start with a opening honeycomb. Usually there'll be some sort of kickoff event where the program is introduced, people are told what's happening. Hopefully, unlike me, they'll told why they're on the program, and they're introduced to their honeycomb, and then that gets sent out. And then before the first session, they have their feedback. So the facilitator both has the results and the individuals have their results. Now, we do not share individual data with the organization, because people need to feel comfortable that they can use this for development, and that encourages honesty all around. We find if reviewers know that their feedback is going to be shared, it influences how they score people and the comments that they give. So that's really important. In terms of the training organization, it varies. If there's a coaching experience, what we say is we ask the individuals to then share their personal data with the coach. But what we give to the facilitators and the subject matter experts is we give them an aggregate report, so they understand the top scoring cells. You get the map of the honeycomb, but you also get individual behavior scores and a host of other information that, again, I'll come on to with some examples. So they start with that report, so they have that understanding of themselves, and it's great when this can be picked up in the sessions and in the workshops. And then often there will be an after report, and this might be at the same time as the last workshop, or it might be a little bit after, because you want to give people time to embed the behaviors, and that's where we measure the progress. Now, sometimes we have an optional midpoint honeycomb where we say to people, hey, it's the middle of the program. Maybe you want to check in, get some follow-up feedback on some things that you might have been working on, or ask for some different topics. And this is really telling, because we like to give people a little bit of freedom of choice here, because what they choose tells us something, and tells us the topics that they're most interested in, most engaged in, or the things that they have questions about. And it helps us understand, beyond even the results, where their focus is and what they're thinking about. So the other method that we use is this focused journey. And in that focused journey, apologies, the Zoom control on the slides are a little bit funny, but I think it's working all right. Is this focused journey, and that is, you ask for one cell at at a time. And this really needs a tight integration with a content and with the program. So you're covering very specific cells. And basically what you're doing is you're getting feedback on a cell and asking for your feedback on the next cell. So every time you come in, you're just working on one topic. And we say it's the focused journey because there is evidence to suggest that if I'm just focusing on these 4 behaviors or 8 at a time, then I'm more likely to actually put them into practice. But as I said, this requires a little bit more of a tighter integration in terms of the design. Now, this is a sort of an ideal world where an organization has bought into the idea of spaced learning, knows that cognitive load is an issue, and is willing to bring people together either virtually or in person for workshops spaced 4 to 6 weeks apart. We all know that's not always the reality. They might be flying a group of people in from the entire world and say, listen, you've got to cover everything in 2 days. I know it's not ideal, but you have to do it. What we tend to recommend then, and this is one of the things that we've done that has been effective, is you do your upfront honeycomb feedback so that when you go in there, go into that session, you can choose what to focus on based on those results. So you don't necessarily have to go through absolutely everything, but you could focus on the most urgent areas and the areas of the deepest risk. And then we recommend setting up with the group these peer support groups, because one of the things we know about behavior change is accountability is really key. And if the organization can't invest in you coming in, at least you can have that, you can have the group, the cohort sort of saying, let's come together and let's support each other, either in a group session or you set up a buddy system or something like that. And then sort of try to give them nudges of asking for feedback throughout, and then doing that final one at the end of the period. So those are just a few models that that we've used. But which brings us, I think, to the next question that you had, Gail, around designing.
Well, actually, we've got a very good question from Nikki. She always has great question. She says, are the apps, actions, and behavior customizable to an organization's competencies or competency framework?
Yes, really great question. And yes, absolutely they are. So the behaviors themselves, we don't change because of how we build and create them, and all of the science and research that goes into them. And it's not just in the writing of the behaviors, but we actually go to original research on what reaches this outcome. But because they're so specific, we've never met a competency that we can't match a behavior to. And if we do, we can write a new behavior. But the cells, we can rename all of them. And in fact, in the honeycomb that I showed you, there was one at the top that said humility. And the reason it said humility was because that was an organization's values that we were working with. And when we looked at their competencies that underpin that value, it was essentially our embracing failure cell. So those were the right behaviors to link to that value. And what we can do, it's really helpful when we can do that, because we can give the organization a map of how people are doing, specifically rolled up to their competencies, their values. And the other thing that we hear from participants is, all right, the competency framework, that's the thing they bring out to tell me why I didn't get the promotion. So people don't actually know how to live the values or act on the competencies. The honeycomb can be that last mile of, if you want to work on this, here's specifically how you do it on a day-to-day basis.
Brilliant.
And I see that there's a follow-up question there about the sort of the strict mapping. And we don't have a strong opinion on whether your competency matches a behavior. We have a strong opinion on how to properly assess that competency. So what we will do, if the organization wants to invest in the time, is the organization needs to explain to us the competency so that we understand it. And we have had with some organizations back and forth where we say, we think this is the right behavior. And they say, that's not quite it. And so we say, okay, how about this behavior or this behavior? And yes, sometimes we will adjust, and we can make minor adjustments that don't hurt the validity, but really it is more about making sure that it is meaningful to the organization, because ultimately we're trying to measure what they want to measure. Now, we have had points where we've challenged organizations where they said, we want to build a culture of psychological safety and improve leadership. And one of the things we want to develop is the ability for people to come in and command a room. And that's where we'll challenge and say, being able to command a room in the traditional sense that it's looked at does not actually lead to cultures of psychological safety. And here's a pile of research that says that actually showing empathy and being more and trying to understand people makes you a more effective leader in developing those cultures of psychological safety. So we will challenge when we think the desired result is not matching up what they perceive to be the things that want to happen. And we do see that as very much our responsibility and a way for us not to cause harm.
Brilliant. And we've got a follow-up questions from Joanna, actually. So you're definitely triggering a great conversation here, Melissa. Who asked, so is there like a counter sell, basically like behavior that we should avoid? Is that something that it's you looked into?
There is not, because what research tells us is it's much harder to stop doing a behavior than it is to start doing a new behavior. So what we're trying to do is actually focus on the positive behaviors that people can put into place that by necessity would mean they stop doing certain behaviors. So we do have a behavior on, I don't interrupt people. So so obviously the negative behavior isn't interrupting people. So we will look at it from that perspective, but it is all framed in the positive things that you should be doing, because that is more likely to have an impact.
Brilliant. And now I know that some of the people in this room use tools like Insights or Strength Scopes. I'm not sure if it's the right place to talk about it, but how does it all fit in together? Because we talked about it, okay? So I'm sure there is a strategy, because they complement each other. It's not because you're using the honeycomb work, then you have to stop using those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the thing we have to be conscious of is how many surveys we're asking people to do. But the fact is, and I see some questions which I think we'll hopefully come on to at the end, as to how do I pitch this to both clients and the individuals. And what we find is people really love learning about themselves. So in terms of doing surveys to help understand themselves, we find that people are pretty open to that, and often pretty eager to do so. The honeycomb is different to things like, so there are sort of a couple of different categories. If you look at things like your MBTIs and your sort of more personality assessment psychometrics, the honeycomb isn't designed to help you understand your personality or how you think about things. It's designed to understand what you're doing and to become more self-aware of the things that you're doing. So they can certainly be used in complement with each other. And we had one organizations who had gone through the strengths-based assessment, and they came up with these categories of things that they wanted to work on. But again, what they didn't have were the specific behaviors that they needed to work on to develop those things. So they were working on, I think strategy came up as one of the areas that the individual needed to develop. But what we'll look at with strategy is, there might be 3 or 4 cells related to strategy, and some of those things you might actually do really well, whereas others you might need to focus on. So you might be really good at gathering diverse perspectives and doing that pre-research to be strategic, but maybe you're poor at actually making a decision and acting on it, and then iterating off of it. So the honeycomb is sort of, you can think of it as the precision tool that comes in after to say, okay, but what specifically do I do differently? And I think a lot of those other tools are used to help you just understand your thought processes and help you. And I think core to it, when you have a great facilitator for those things, it also helps you understand that everybody doesn't think the same way and doesn't react to things the same way. So So yeah.
That's very true. Thank you very much, Melissa. In the interest of time, I think we should carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. So
thank you.
So I think you had asked about the question that you had asked about was in terms of design and engagement, and I think and how that shifts what the facilitator does. And I think, the short answer is it doesn't have to at all. You can continue doing what you're doing and have the honeycomb as a bookend, as a beginning and end for the program. It is more effective if it's integrated. And again, there is that scientific research that tells us that if you mention the specific behaviors in the workshop, in the program, and actually ask people to commit and ask them to do the cognitive work to think about what might stop them and what obstacles they would see and how they would overcome them, they're more likely to be successful when they put that behavior into practice. But to get onto the data piece, because I think that is a really important component to it. And if we're looking at, this isn't the prettiest graph, this isn't the one that we put to our clients, but I love it because it's so detailed. And when we're talking about impact measurement, this is what so this tracks the beginning behavior scores and the ending behavior scores. And as you can see, there are a lot, it's every individual score. So it's not the averages of individuals, but what this is showing is that consistent upward progression and improvement. And again, we make this a bit prettier for clients and for you to share with your clients, but essentially what this is showing is that we are seeing this overall improvement. And when you've got a cohort of 15, 20 people who then are going back into a business and also demonstrating these positive behaviors, that has a knock-on impact as well. So that's really fundamentally that impact measurement. But what we also give you is a really rich data picture that can help you inform how you're working with the organization, but also add additional valuable insights to your clients. So this self-awareness piece is really important. And when we see people score themselves higher than other people score them, that's a big area of risk, because if my perception of how I'm doing is different and is better, I think I'm doing better than what people are telling me, I'm less likely to act on that feedback. So if you have areas where people are scoring themselves much higher, those are going to be the biggest areas of risk, and that where you as a facilitator might need to focus on. We need to break this down a little bit more and understand why there's this misconception. Interestingly, in one organization, we saw that women scored themselves higher in their self-assessment than they were being rated, and that gap was bigger than in men, which was a big shock to us, because we would have thought it would have been the opposite. So we went to a researcher in the area, and she said, well, no, research tells us that women don't get direct feedback as much as what men do, and that hurts their progression because they don't know what they need to develop. So we were able to go back to that organization and say, we think you have a broader problem around feedback and how you're giving that, and the unfairness in general of where women are getting that direct feedback. That also becomes another opportunity. We think you should launch a training program for managers on equally delivering feedback. But again, in this area, people were scoring themselves lower. And again, in this organization, we were able to have a conversation around the really high expectations and the fact that people weren't getting positive feedback often enough. In another one, we saw a really big difference between managers and other people, which again told us either managers weren't giving, people were maybe behaving differently in front of managers than they were in front of other people, and that managers wouldn't be in a good position to help develop folks because they're not seeing these not as good, not as positive behaviors. Again, this is another map of just the self-awareness that you can see. And we always talk about impact measurement and proving that we've done a good job, which is really important. But also, one of the things I really like to do is shift that conversation, because it's not just about proving we were right and proving we did a good job. And yes, as Gail said, with difficult times, the ROI argument is an important one. So we do need to validate that we're doing well. But one of the most interesting things for me is where things aren't improving. And again, giving organizations this richer data picture to say, listen, we've done a really great job with this cohort. consistent improvement over time, but here are all these other things that are going on in your organization that you should look at. This to me is one of the most interesting pieces of data, the least improved cell. So everybody in this cohort had worked on, saw improvement on every other cell except for this one. That tells us to the organization there's something going on here. Either it's not clear what you're expecting of people, or there are systems in place, or management or something is stopping people from improving in this area. And again, that's another opportunity for the organization, not just to feel good about the investment they made with you because your program worked, but what to do next and how to identify a really significant area of risk. Now, the other thing that we do is, where it is legally allowed in the country, we do demographic analysis. And again, that helps us understand where people might be having different experiences and where there might be some inequality into the system. So what we found in one organization is that there was a really good gender parity across most behaviors, except in the area of valuing feedback. So people weren't listening to women as much. And because of the way that we gather this data, it means that it's really powerful, because it's a large number of people that we are asking. And it might be something that any individual woman might not notice, but because we are asking this for this specific person, how often are they doing this behavior? It's not a value judgment. It's not, are they treating people unfairly? Are they sexist? It's just looking at this in the aggregate. So it's not about targeting any individual, but it's about going to the organization and saying, listen, I think you have an issue here, and it's something you need to address. In another organization, we found that many people in the organization were saying not applicable to challenging bias communication, which told us that people can't see it, except for people in the LGBTQ plus population who are scoring people quite low on it. So again, this told us that you might have a problem with homophobic speech, and that obviously needs to be something that is addressed. And the other thing I want to talk about is longitudinal analysis. I think one of the most powerful things is when we can have long-term relationships with organizations. And there is one organization that we're working with. We went in with a training provider, and we've been running with their cohorts for about 2 years now. I think we're on our 8th cohort with them. And that longitudinal analysis gives us more people to put into the honeycomb, which gives us more data, more analysis, more richer insights that we can gather. But it also shows us how things shift over time. And what they've also done is they've taken the honeycomb and broadened it out to people who are not in the programs, so that we can identify where are the things that people need help with, to support with, so that we can introduce new and different programs. But when we are able to stay with an organization over time, we had this experience in COVID, where this organization was seeing a steady improvement, but then as soon as COVID hit, the manager feedback for communicating effectively fell off a cliff. So we were able to go to them in this really stressful time to say, listen, your managers aren't communicating with folks, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and we know that, but you need to work with your managers to hone the messages and share exactly what you're going to share with people, because that is the thing that has come up and been an issue. So I think all these things are really useful, like beyond that, just what are the top scoring behaviors, what are the lowest scoring behaviors, and did we see improvement? There's such a rich picture that you can bring to an organization to help them understand their people.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Melissa. Is there anything you want to add? Because we've got a couple of questions coming up.
Yeah, I think let's go to the questions. I think just in case people need to drop off early, just to say I'm very happy to continue the conversation, and in the follow-up we'll send links to my contact details. But yes, no, happy to go for I've been sort of keeping a little bit of an eye on this. Seems like that there are some good questions in there. So yeah, let's go to the questions.
Absolutely. But just to recap, I think we can see the power of feedback, which is something CIPD highlighted, that the going on to an in-person, whichever in-person it is, whether in a physical room or in a virtual room, learners really want to seek is feedback, personalized feedback. And I think we can see that with this kind of tools, you're creating this through the journey. The learners are going to have a personal feedback, and they are going to be able to and the facilitator will be able to focus on what is more needed by the group, for the group, which obviously it's easier to be more personalized. It's a group of 8 to 15 people rather than a cohort of 30 people, but we can see here that it enables you to do just that and progress. And it's also, we're often worried that technology will replace us as facilitators, but we can see here with what Melissa's used for data is that it's actually a tool to accelerate collaborations with the right people in the right context. It is something that actually going to tie you closer to your clients. So thank you so much, Melissa. And I've got very good questions, as usual, from Nikki. She asked, do honeycombs use your anonymized combined data across all organizations to support microbehavioral research and analysis?
Absolutely. And that is the other reason why the behaviors don't change. It's so that we can do that overall research and do that macro analysis. And that is at a number of different levels. So, as you see, we draw some conclusions based on the results, and that's from direct experience on how these behaviors have been responded to in the past. But the other thing is we're also working with clients to some of them create their a bespoke honeycomb that they then use consistently. So one of our clients, a training provider, had their own point of view about leadership and wanted to present their own perspective on leadership. And again, we did that process of, here's the bank of scientifically valid honeycomb behaviors, built them their custom honeycomb, and now they can get their own macro analysis across multiple organizations, potentially benchmark different organizations against themselves, so they're be able to give deeper insight into their particular perspective. Another project we're working on with the Royal Academy of Engineering is for startups and scale-ups in the engineering space in the UK. And what that has allowed us to do is take organizations with smaller populations who we have to be very careful about sharing demographic analysis with, because they might have one person who fits that identity, so that would compromise anonymity. But because we're going across a number of those organizations, we can say consistently, we found these differences and your organization has not disproven that. So it's a way for us to protect anonymity, but also say to these smaller organizations, you need to address these areas of inequality. And also with them, we're tracking what the specific things and differences are in different points of the organization. And the more people we put in and the more information we have, the better we'll be able to do that. So we're also, and I think, Gail, you talked about this at the beginning, right? Impact, behavioral, there are sort of different levels, right? There's a did I enjoy the experience? And obviously that's important because we want them to show up to the next workshop.
Absolutely.
But then there's, really importantly, did I shift the behavior? And that's the thing that we can most control, right? Did we do that behavioral shift? And it is something that actually happens that will have an impact. Now, obviously, the organization is doing that for business impact. What we found is that it's really hard for organizations to gather that data. But again, if we can look at it in the aggregate and partner with more training organizations to look at which teams were successful and which teams and what their behavior profiles were, there's a deeper set of analysis that we will be able to do in the future.
Brilliant. And it also says that there is not one way. I mean, it's not going to solve everybody's problems, right? And once again, there are going people that even with this kind of tool are going to fall out. But once again, and Melissa, get me if I'm wrong, it is a data. What is the profile of the person falling out of the program, or not engaging or not turning up? And that the kind of information that helps, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why we love working with training providers, because the success rate is so much higher than when we use a honeycomb just alone in a population. And, and because when we we typically get about a 98% response rate when we work with training providers who are delivering a program. And because you have all that support and because there's that accountability, all those different pieces mean that people are going to be more engaged. And in the aggregate, we do see that improvement in that behavioral shift. So we typically only have 1 or 2 people who disengage with the platform when we're in a program. Whereas if we go into our organization, we say just use the honeycomb. Our goal is something around 25 to 45% of the organization, depending on how much support there is internal in the organization.
Brilliant. Thank you, Melissa. Stefan, do you have a question? So I see you popping up.
Oh, yeah, I just have a question on the design. So thank you, Melissa. The question is, knowing that people are not really into pre-work and try to run away as quickly as I can, what's the pitch towards a participant from a client to still engage prior to the actual program?
Yeah, so is this to the participant on the program, to why you should take the time to do this little bit of extra work? And yeah, I mean, I think that part of that comes into the selling of the whole program, which is that, you know, you are investing time in this. The honeycomb will help give you insights to understand yourself better, and it is a tool to help support you throughout the process. So it is that resource that you can go to at any point when you want to improve something and develop that level of self-awareness. So I think, you know, the key thing that we talk about is that it really helps. Well, it can help the person do less work in the program because they know where they need to focus. So if they find out that they have strengths in a certain area, then they don't have to waste their time really working on developing that, because they know that's a strong point, and they can focus their time on working on the areas that they need to improve. Now, ideally, we love folks that have strengths on areas in the program to set up as peer mentors and to help support other folks. But really, it is about, for them, it's about getting the most out of the program in the most efficient way. And I think the other really key thing is, and it leads back to that sort of defining what good actually looks like, because what we found is that for people who are really ambitious, because typically the program is designed by the organization, even if they're not doing a bespoke design, they've decided that these are the things that we want to develop these people in. You having a picture of where you need to develop that is only shared with you, nobody else sees it, where you can get it honestly, will help you in your career. By developing these areas where you have gaps and identifying where you have gaps, it'll help you in your future career. We actually did a exercise where we looked at the different types of people on the program, and it was from our product designer who did it. And it was a really brilliant piece of work, because it was the really pragmatic person with no personal motivation or aspirational to improve themselves, but just wanted to get ahead, is actually our most engaged user, because they see this as a tool that will help them get the next promotion, get better performance appraisals, not because of the data going into the performance appraisal, but because it will help them improve. So I think it's really focused on that piece of, this will allow you to personalize this experience so that it makes the most difference to you as an individual. And I think that's probably the fundamental selling point.
Brilliant. And if I can just add something to it, is also if the corporate clients wishes to discuss about impact, they also have to realize that it's not a one-way traffic, and that's also something to bounce back, because very often as training provider, a lot is handed over and said, oh, how are you going to demonstrate impact, right? It's a two-way traffic. We cannot demonstrate impact if the corporate client is not prepared to give us data or help us gather data or support the actions. Then there's no point. Then it's just learning as a plaster. And then almost, I would say, then at this stage, if they're not prepared to invest and support, then probably it's the case for an off-the-shelf standard sessions rather than something bespoke where we're going to be able to identify the impact. But that's maybe a different conversations. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I feel you enjoyed the conversations. I did anyway. So thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you so much, all of you who gave up your lunch break in various parts of Europe to join us today. It was our first sessions on using digital tools and how they can help accelerate impact and accelerate the learning. You've got Melissa's contact details in the chat. Please do connect with her. We are going to send the recording if you miss bits of it, and all the links as well, but feel free to contact her. And we are carrying on. Our next session is about AI-powered blended learning. So it's using AI-driven tool to quickly design learning journeys and see how that works with subject matter experts. Fascinating tool. Anything with AI is fascinating and trendy at the moment. So here we go. And it is going to be on Friday, the 20th of October, same time. So we're looking forward to seeing you. And once again, thank you so much, Melissa, for your time. It was a very insightful session. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely Friday afternoon.